And I'm here with my colleague, Greg Davies, and we're so thrilled to see all of you in person. After our January virtual, we really wanted to have a commitment to try and bring you guys together and to talk about the future of downtown. And so thank you for taking time out of your day. I'm so pleased to introduce our council president, Shannon Harden, who's going to kick this off.
Well, good evening, everyone. It is good to be back together. For Amy, how many folks do we have on the virtual?
More than about 250.
250 folks who gave their evening a month or so ago to really dream out loud, to vision out loud together what the future of our downtown will be. I just think it's important that as a community, we know that the conversations that we have, the things that we plan for today, the work that we do in articulating our values and our vision and our dreams for collective space that serves everybody, that work will show itself over the next 10, 15, 20 years in physical spaces, but in real spaces. Because at the end of the day, spaces are for people. And downtown is the space that literally is for all of our community. So I'm really excited about this conversation. I think that it is 100% in line with everything that all of us, regardless if we're residents, if you work in the private sector, public sector, regardless of what you do, if you live in this region, everything that our lives will be engaged around will be around growth. We're going to add 500,000 to 1 million people. What our community looks like in the next 15 to 20 years will be different. That can be scary to some folks, but for me, I just see so much opportunity because I believe that that means that we, the folks in this room, the folks who show up, the folks that articulate what our hopes and dreams are for our spaces, we get to create what that community looks like so that it's not a zero-sum game, that the growth or the change is against or for someone, but really that we create a community and a downtown community that is for everyone. It was how we got the downtown that we're so proud of today because folks came together 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago and were thoughtful. They envisioned a different downtown, a downtown that was not just for working 9 to 5, but a place where you could live, you can be entertained. Those things take intentionality, and I think that you showing up today, this process that we see today, is us as a community being intentional about that collective community, that vision that this downtown be for everyone. So I look forward to not just tonight's conversation, but all the conversations going forward, and would ask you to continue to stack hands with us as a community, because today we're talking downtown strategic planning. Tomorrow we'll be talking how we develop and how we grow our entire city and truthfully our entire region. And we cannot do it without voices that are interested parties. And again, interested parties means anybody who lives, works, or plays in our city has to be at the table so that we can create, continue to create a more diverse and more inclusive downtown, but more so a more diverse and inclusive city. So thank you all for being here. I'm so excited for Chris and the work that he'll do. What I'm actually doing is holding up for my former boss, Mayor Coleman, or the chairman as they call him here, but I hear he's on the way. But look forward to the presentation. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Council President Harden. All right, I'm just going to do that. Thank you again for all of you being here. The fact that you're here shows that you have the passion for downtown, like so many of us. So it's wonderful. And we're going to dive in. I know what you really want to do, and what we all really want to do, is have conversations. And we'll be doing that here after I do this, hopefully, short presentation. But I do want to provide some background. So we're going to talk about, this is really a report out of what we heard in our first community workshop, and then talking about the framework that we're starting to put together and we want to get your reaction to tonight. So as a reminder of this process, we're in phase 2. We've gathered a lot of great input from all of you, and we're going to share that with you tonight, and we're starting to put this into a strategic framework. And then after we listen to what you have to say tonight and online and with future conversations across the next several months, we are going to pull together a draft plan that will show some of the big visions and strategies and direction for you all to react to at a third meeting this summer. So I also want to remind you of kind of the arc, the continuum that we have done in downtown Columbus. So I don't think many people think about the built environment. Maybe some of you do, but the average person doesn't. Places like downtown Columbus don't happen by accident. These great places that we love. And the story with downtown Columbus is no different. We started, some of you were probably involved with strategic planning in 2001, with a strategic plan that was then finalized in 2002, that really set the stage. And then we've had a 2010 plan, and now we are coming back together as a third strategic plan for downtown. And this is a really important time because COVID really requires us to refocus on downtown. It's had impacts. We're going to talk a bit more about that downtown. So this is a really important time to come back together and say, all right, what can we do? Where do we want downtown to go from here? And one of the big things that we heard from all the input we've had over the last several months is this plan needs to be people-focused. It is about the people. Downtown is everyone's neighborhood. How do we make sure everyone feels welcome and is a part of this? And again, as Council President Harden said, we're all in this together. What do we want it to be moving forward? So a high-level summary of what we've heard. Again, we've talked to a lot of people over the last several months. This is our input tracking numbers so far to date. We're going to continue to have more conversations, but this is a good response. We've got a lot of great insight from all of you, and thanks to those of you that have participated and those that have not. Please get on our website, continue to participate, and talk to us tonight. So some of the summaries. So this is from a survey at both the workshop and online, and there's some interesting takeaways. First is downtown really is everyone's neighborhood. You see how many people come and spend time, either live, work, visit downtown. The second is, I'm interested at the pie chart. It is a really nice cross-section, pretty evenly distributed of how long people have lived and worked in downtown. And what this suggests to me is we continue to be a vibrant community. People are staying here, continue to work here, but people are also moving here and engaging. And so it's creating this really dynamic and fresh perspective. And I think it's something that's special about Columbus that we celebrate. And then I think the other big third takeaway here is the top bar there, which is 30% said that they originally came to Central Ohio because of schooling, because of education. So I think we already know that, but it shows how important our schools are to drawing and introducing people to Central Ohio, to Columbus, and to downtown. And then here you can see, I think, on the left-hand side, that people do come across a spectrum of time. Some people are coming every day. Some people are coming pretty frequently. So it's an interesting cross-section, but it's also showing, I think, that as we know, we need to continue to work on getting people to want to come downtown. And how do we, again, make it that attraction? And I'm at actually a perfect spot in just a second to have Chairman Coleman speak in just a second. But I do want to also say we've reached out to a number of organizations. We've had conversations with downtown stakeholders, and they've provided a really high level, I think, good summary of concerns and things that we're thinking about for downtown. First is we had fantastic momentum downtown right up to COVID. It felt like things were really breaking, moving forward, and we were about to go to even a next level. Second, as we all are realizing and wrestling with, COVID has changed the dynamic and our perception of the work environment. And how do we pivot or think about that as it relates to downtown? Also, we've heard it's become a priority for all of us. We have a housing problem in Central Ohio as a region. We have an affordable housing problem, and downtown has to play a critical part in that. It has to be part of addressing that. And then we also know that equity, inclusion, and participation and bringing people together is an important role. It's got to be part of whatever we do downtown. And then retail continues to be, it was a major issue before COVID. COVID's only made it worse. We've got to think about it. We used to think about it in the national terms. Now we got to at least think about it in just how do we survive, how do we service downtown with our retail. And then we have public safety issues and the perceptions, I think, as much as anything. And then just this feeling that while other communities in Central Ohio are spending a lot of effort to try to replicate what we have downtown. We have it downtown, and we need to continue to make sure that we are that place everyone wants to come. So I'm going to go through these, but only after Chairman Coleman. Do you want to say a few words, or do you want me to take?
Whatever.
Yeah, I'll go back to this and let you do an introduction.
More interesting than anything I have to say. Yeah. Thank you. You know, this is incredible. I'm looking at this audience of people that want to be part of the future and the present and see the growth of our community. And I see Council President Shannon Harden's here, has done a great job in leading the city. But to see all of you here to be pointing towards the future, saying that we're putting a stake in the ground, and the stake is to figure out how we go from here. We've done a good job up to now, but things have got to change. We've got to go from people to places, up to places to people. And you all are so much a part of how we get there. And this is a compilation of the past concerns that we had during this whole community process. And you've done a great job. And I've looked at some of this, kind of a preview of it, but it's fascinating of the great opportunities we have in our city to shape the future of our city and our downtown. There was a day not long ago, just 20 years, some of you are so young. 20 years ago, actually longer than that, 25 years ago, you could roll a bowling ball down the middle of Broad and High Street at 6 o'clock in the evening on a Friday and hit no one because everybody already left to go home someplace in the suburbs. That's changed. But with COVID, a new time, a new era, it's time to think differently, bigger, bolder. Think about the people that live here. Affordable housing. Housing is happening now. We got to make it affordable. Back in the day, and I'm back in the day, you see the gray hair. Any kind of housing, because there was zero housing here. There was no activity here unless you came to this great library, maybe the Palace, maybe the Ohio Theater. That's about it. Now there's so much to do, but we can do a lot better with your input and make this thing work for all of us. All of us. I always said that downtown is everybody's neighborhood. Well, this is your neighborhood. Wherever you live, you have a piece of the rock. You have a vested interest in the success of this place right here. So go at it, give us some good thoughts, and hear this presentation because I'm excited, if you can't tell. I'm excited about the future and what the future can bring. I hope to be around to see all this happen because I think it can happen. And all too often we see plans put together in this city and other cities, and they gather dust on the shelves. This is not a plan that can gather dust. This is a plan that has to be activated and that can get done in our city, like we did over on Gay Street, right? Thank you. All right. Thanks. See you. Okay.
Thank you. I'm already fired up. That was great. And I realized the section I should have had Chairman Coleman do, but we'll get to that here in just a second. So just as a summary, again, of the input we heard from the community survey and from the workshop, we asked several questions. One question we asked was, what are your favorite places downtown? Probably not surprising to any of you that restaurants and bars, kind of the activity centers, our park spaces, and our cultural attractions and entertainment were the big draws for downtown. I think it does say, and you can see here, people putting dots and saying, look, again, you can see the parks, you can see the activity centers, but it does, I think, reinforce the fact that after the 2010 plan and in that time period, we did some major projects like the side of Greenways, and it shows that those investments that we put in ourselves have paid off because they are part of the key places that people come and visit, bring people to downtown. We also asked, all right, well, okay, what would you change? What would you improve about downtown? Probably, we heard this a lot from a lot of people, not just here, but in conversations. Alternative transportation, transit, how do we reduce car dependency? And I think our reaction in hearing that so much is that's probably not a surprise. It's something, mobility is something we have struggled with for decades in Columbus, in particular downtown, and we are probably behind when you compare to our peer cities. We are behind where we should be when we think about that. So I'm reassured that that's up there because I think that's probably right. It's one of the big areas we need to focus on. Events and programming, like what we heard people say is we need more events, we need more diversity of events and programming. Again, getting people back downtown and making everyone feel welcome downtown. And then built environment, I'll actually show you on the next slide. I think what people really were talking about is getting more housing downtown and how do we get rid of all the surface lots? How do we create downtown as a more engaging built place? So we heard a lot of that. How do we make people feel comfortable walking around and moving around downtown? And then lastly, we said, what are your ideas for the future? And we got a whole raft of fantastic ideas. We actually want to continue this conversation with you tonight. And in fact, and we'll get to this, but I just want to mention, you all got a sheet, should have gotten a sheet that says, what's your big idea for downtown? We are very interested, if you have one, if you have 5, if you have 10, whatever, of writing your big ideas for downtown, and we're going to collect them in the back. But again, continuing this conversation, what would be the one big thing you would do if you could, make one major change in downtown? Would love to hear that big idea. Okay, so now I want to talk about plan context, and this builds right off of where Chairman Coleman, former Mayor Coleman, and his hard work and his administration, all of your hard work. We look at the population of downtown Columbus, and by 1980, we had hit a major trough. We had invested and expanded out. We hadn't invested in. And it showed, and we lost population. It was, again, back to what Chairman Coleman said, the bowling ball downtown. I mean, it's real. You can see it in the numbers. There was nobody living downtown, hardly anyone. And so that led, by 2000, to an effort by the city and the community to say, what can we do? We got to do something about it. And that led to the 2002 strategic plan that said we are going to put policies and investments in place to get people, private and public efforts to get development, residential investment downtown and get people living downtown. And you can see it took a little bit, but we got a little momentum. And as we got more momentum, in 2010, we did another strategic plan and we said, all right, we got to create some great places so people want to be downtown, want to live downtown. They have the amenities that they would like to have that you'd expect in a big city. And now it's accelerated, and we can really celebrate the fact that we've now crossed that 10,000 resident population downtown. And that's actually worth some applause. I think we should stop and say, that's fantastic. So pat yourself on the back. But why we're here is to say what's next, right? So the good news is, if you look at the pipeline of projects, just what people have proposed and what's in the pipeline for review and approval, across the next 2 or 3 years, we will be able to get to 15,000 residents downtown, which is great. So we're continuing that momentum. It's not as steep, but again, these are just the ones we know of. So hopefully we can keep that line going up pretty steep. But the question for all of you is, where next? What's our next goal for residents in downtown? What do we want to set out there? And so we provided some benchmarks of some other downtowns, some peer cities, just to get the thought going. I do want to note that these are 2017 numbers, but I'll tell you it's because we were trying to compare like sizes and like populations, and get apples to apples comparison is way harder than anyone would think. So this is from one source. It gives you numbers from 2017, but it gives you a sense of where these cities are compared to us. But the real important point is that spectrum, order of magnitude. So let's talk a little bit more about this. So this is a graph. The little bitty orange things are the downtown population. The yellow is the amount of population in Columbus. And you can see as we've grown, which has been great, but we've grown outwards. I think we all know that. The blue line is the percent of people, Columbus population, living downtown. And so obviously, 1940s were very compact. Most people were living downtown. As we grew out, it became a very, very low percentage. You can see that trough that we saw in the previous graph. And now we're starting to pull up. We're at just over 1% of Columbus population living downtown. But we've all been reading the papers, listening to the forecasts, and what we're being told is that by 2050, as a region, we're going to add another 630,000 people by 2050, and this was before the Intel announcement and all the increased activity that we're already seeing as a city and region based on just that one announcement. So my guess, personally, would be, barring other things happening, we'll probably exceed that number. So then, with that as food for thought, you say, well, if we could just capture a certain percent of that downtown where people aren't as strenuously objecting to increased density and development. I mean, this is a place, if you're going to put density and development, this seems like one good place to do it where people are going to agree. So how much can we capture downtown? What percent should we be aiming for? And you can see, if we just got 1% of that growth by 2050, we could be where Denver was in 2017. If we got 2%, we could be where Charlotte was in 2017. If we got 5%, we could be where Minneapolis was in 2017. I will also say, as a side note, I think what we're finding in our research is when you get to the 40,000 population level, things start working better. So it's an interesting thing to think about. But that would be talking about capturing 5% of our population growth, depending on how much we get here, in downtown. So something to think about, something we'd love to hear your thoughts on. Which brings us, I think, back to the input that we heard from all of you from the community. People were very concerned, still are, about how do we get people back to work, back to the office downtown, because many things are dependent on that worker population because we had so few residents downtown. So how do we get people back downtown? What's the future of office? What does that look like? How can we help the office environment downtown? We've heard safety's a priority. Actual safety, perception of safety, how do we get people feeling comfortable downtown again? The desire that's been decades long for getting more and better transportation options downtown. And we always hear people talking about more retail and entertainment options downtown. What is one of the big solutions to all of this? More people downtown. And really specifically, more residents downtown. If we have more residents living downtown, all of these things get better. And we can start addressing more of them. So we bring this up, this whole idea of how big of a residential population we want downtown, because it is a really important piece of the downtown puzzle. It's something that former Mayor Michael Coleman realized as part of the 2002 effort, and it's something that continues to come back up. It's still something that we all need to be thinking about. So plan framework. We took all the great input that we received from you and tried to talk about, all right, well, what if we're going to get some big goals, what would they be? And what it really came back to, again, is it's about people. But we tried to distill it into 7 categories. And so we have a neighborhood for all, an attractive and thriving place to work, a vibrant 18-hour destination. I'll stop and say, we said 18-hour because people want to sleep, and if it was 24 hours, that might not be what you really want. A sustainable capital city, a connected hub, an economic engine for the region, and the cultural heart of the city. Now, it's not to say that we aren't these things already to some extent, but how do we continue to boost this? How do we really, go past where we are today? What do we aspire to be? Where are we going to be in 10 years? So this is kind of the big framework. Now, because you don't want to listen to me talk for another 50 minutes, and we didn't have room for 7 tables, we've distilled this down into kind of 4 strategies for tonight, and we've got a table for each of these around the room here, and we want to get your input on it. So these strategies were, how do we increase and leverage our assets? How do we boost the green network? How do we accelerate mobility momentum? And how do we grow urban neighborhood districts? So I'm going to talk about each of these. So let's talk about increasing and leveraging our assets. This is a big one that has a lot of pieces in it, so let's dive in. So first of all, let's recognize, as we just said, we've got kind of nascent residential neighborhoods growing in downtown. Let's figure out how to increase them, and we have a whole section talking about that. But it is kind of interesting. You can kind of, well, hopefully you can kind of see Highlighted here are some of these areas where we've had existing neighborhoods, where we've grown some neighborhoods, where we're trying to grow new neighborhoods. Talking about from Topiary Park, Neighborhood Launch, Side of Peninsula as examples. But we want to create 5-minute neighborhoods so that people can get services and the things they need and the amenities within a 5-minute walk of where they live. So we've got a lot of work to do. Plus, we really need to create all these other pieces of those goals that we just talked about. So we'll get back to that. But let's talk about office. So office is a critical concern. What is the office world going to be like now, moving forward? And we're all still trying to wrestle with that. COVID definitely changed all sorts of things, made people like me embrace technology and stop printing things out on the printer and actually talk to people from very far locations without going there. I mean, it was a breakthrough. A number of us really enjoyed spending more time at home and doing other things, but there's so many positives to working together in person. And the other thing, we brought it up before, that bottom graph at the left side, office, because of income tax, is the lifeblood of cities. It's the lifeblood of Columbus. When you see how many workers work in downtown in such a small area compared to the area of Columbus, downtown is an economic engine for the entire city and helps the city do all the great things that all of us want in Columbus. So we do have to worry about this. For that reason, as much as just, I think, creating a great place where people actually do want to work and not just at home. So I think the future of office, I think what we're all hearing, is that it's got to be someplace that's attractive, that makes you want to come into work, someplace where you can interact with people because you're not interacting with anybody but maybe family or roommates at home. So you want to create a great place for coworkers, a place that's kind of more luxurious, kind of like home, has the amenities, the things you want, great places to get together, to socialize. We need to create that and build that into our office environment. So that's really one of the big things. How do we create those dynamic places that people want to be? And that's really our big task when we talk about office and office environment in downtown and keeping people and getting people back here working. Part of office, but I think also I talked about how many people come and experience Columbus and Central Ohio because of where they go to school. Interestingly, downtown, we have over 30,000 students, college and up, coming downtown. We also have things like Cristo Rey and the downtown high school. So we're getting people downtown. Historically, they've been kind of like isolated campuses. And that's partly for safety and perceptions and all that kind of stuff, because a lot of them are driving in and driving out too, got a lot of parking. They just haven't really integrated into the downtown fabric of downtown Columbus the way we need to. Most of them are aware of it, most of them are working on it, but it's something we need to keep encouraging. And then likewise, we got to point out Grant Medical Center. It is our downtown hospital. It serves not just downtown, but our surrounding neighborhoods. It's a level 1 trauma center. It does a lot of the serious kinds of surgeries that we need in Columbus and Central Ohio. So we've got to make sure that we're creating a framework for them to reinvest and continue to invest in their facilities, because we really need that downtown. It's an important asset. Just outside the boundaries, we should also acknowledge Nationwide Children's Hospital and all the development and research and important things they do, not just for downtown, but for all of Columbus, for all of Central Ohio, actually for our multi-state region. On arts and culture, sports, arts and culture are what everyone thinks of when they think of downtown. This is what brings people that don't live or work downtown. It also got hit by COVID. You can see the numbers again on the bottom left side graph there. We went from 10 million visitors downtown to 1. Now it's coming back up, but that's a crushing blow. So we need to think about how do we help our arts and cultural institutions. How do we create environments and kind of elevate it back up as this is the centerpiece of our region, where you come for the theater experience, the cultural art experience, where you come for the sports experience. I think we're doing pretty well on the sports side, but the other one, we've put investments there. But we need to think about now, going back, think about the theaters and the arts. And probably need to spend more on arts. It's been another long-standing thing about how do we have more public art in downtown and Columbus. So things to think about. How do we create more experiences related around these? And then retail. Retail's been a thing we've talked about for, again, decades. And we got City Center kind of just in time to see that whole kind of urban mall die. And so now we've got these small retail clusters. They're dynamic. They're where people go. You can see that from the input from the community. But they're probably not big enough, not enough. How do we grow these? And likewise, they got impacted heavily by COVID. So we need to think about how do we do this? And we've got examples. You think about North Market as an incubator space. We have birthed Columbus-centric, Columbus-based companies, multi-million-dollar ones, out of the market. So how do we create more environments like that where we can incubate minority, local, Columbus-centric kinds of businesses? And how do we kind of use Columbus as that place where we do it? It's Columbus downtown. It's something important to think about. The other piece, we saw how we had to intervene to get the residential development downtown and get people living back downtown. If we really want the retail, which we keep talking about, we're going to have to think the same way. We're going to have to intervene. And that's going to be policies, that's going to be incentives, that's going to be public-private partnerships. If we really want to create this kind of retail center downtown, it's going to take that same level of effort. We're hearing it from you. We need to think about what we do to make that happen. So how do we connect all these different things together? We need to talk about things like activating ground floors. Now that's easier said than done. At least focus on those 5-minute areas, those nodes on corners. We need to infill surface parking lots. We've heard that from everybody. There's ways to do that. It probably means investing in structures so we can free up land for development, and adding kind of street life programming, redeveloping areas so that there's activity and things going on. So this is a map that says, well, where are the areas we would need to connect? There's a lot on there, granted, and it's not all bad, but we need to think about how we connect these destinations. We're showing you streets intentionally, because if you think about it, streets are how people move around downtown. It's public space. It's our space. It's the space that we as a community control. It's where we can make change the fastest. So how can we create some streets? Great streets, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. We also heard about key locations that we might think about. There's always been the Abbott parking lots. There's things like the Convention Center parking lot. We've heard things like YMCA is now coming up, and the Beacon building is controlled by the city. Things like the Greyhound bus station. So there's opportunities, interesting opportunities when you think about how we activate and what purposes, how we repurpose them, and work with the owners and the community and what they could be, and imagining that. So now let's talk about the Green Network, boost the Green Network. So we've made the investment in these big signature green spaces, and they are really enjoyed by the community. We're seeing that. So we've done that big investment. Now we got to talk about some other pieces. One, the city has this urban forestry master plan, and when they put all the data together, downtown was is the lowest tree canopy coverage of all the neighborhoods in Columbus. We got to do something about that. One way to think about streets, and we learned this from COVID, is think about streets as linear parks. We all wanted to walk out of our house where we lived, and we wanted to experience something quick, and we wanted to walk around and do a loop and get some exercise, get outside. When you have these green linear streets with street trees and green space, it's more like a park. It really is that great amenity. It's another thing that gets people, I think, wanting to live in places like downtown. So again, you can see streets we have that we need to improve, streets that, well, think of like High Street or the Convention Center, streets that we've done something to improve. So we know how to do it, and it does take effort. But across time, we need to be targeting downtown streets, and we need to make them linear green parks that connect places. Again, we've invested in these signature downtown parks, but when you talk about how do we have residents within a 5-minute walk of a park space, you can see we've got gaps. So rather than the signature parks, what we now need to think about is, as neighborhoods develop, we need to think about, can we create some neighborhood parks, some neighborhood scale parks, and spread them out throughout downtown? That's something we're going to be asking you about. We heard how much people love the side of Greenway, side of Mile. But we also heard this is such a great asset, there's not enough activity, we need more things to do. And so that's come out in different things. So this is another station we're going to have, want to get your input. But people suggested things like, can we realize the vision in Rapid 5? If you guys aren't familiar with that, you should look up that website. Look at the confluence, look at more retail along the trails systems. Can we have places where we actually have rentable canoes or boats or kayaks? There's some great infill opportunities. Where do we put public art? These are all kinds of things that people talked about, and love to get your ideas tonight. Okay, mobility. Like I keep saying, it's been an ongoing thing we've all been talking about here for decades. So the good news is that if you think about mobility in a regional level and a local level, at the regional level, there's some exciting things going on. And we need all of you, all of us, all the community to really get behind these and make these happen. Because we've talked about things before. This is our chance to really get it going. So Amtrak is back. They're saying, hey, let's do a statewide system, 3C plus D, Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati. That, personally, I think would be fantastic. We need to get the state representatives, state agencies, our state legislature, governor, to raise all they have to do by next month is raise their hand and say, we're interested in being further studied this next year to give us more details. So, but if we don't raise our hand, it's going to move on by. So we got to get everybody to get the hand raised and say, yeah, we're interested in the next level of study. Some people are here from CODA, it's great, in the city of Columbus. Link Us is fantastic. It's a really big kind of move forward, high capacity transit, looking at 8 lines around central Ohio, connecting to downtown. You should visit the website. There's public meetings all throughout now through the summer. Really want to get your input. So that's a really exciting thing. So here's actually a map of the Link Us lines, the east and west corridor and the northwest corridor that are being studied in detail right now. You can see how they come into downtown. Those are the dark lines. We've got transit terminals we should be thinking about. We've got the CMAX line. We've got the Amtrak station at the top. And faded in the background, you can see our existing bus lines, which again are so important, and converge downtown. I saw Mark Conti earlier. Want to give Mark a shout out. 2 things. One is he and the SID team, the CPAS program, it's amazing. We've got 12,000, almost 13,000 workers downtown in the CPAS program. That's amazing. It continues to reinforce the transit system that we're all looking for. Also want to thank Mark because his SID report is where we get a lot of the data that we're showing on these slides, so let me acknowledge that. Then we've got other things. When we heard from the input, one of the things we heard over and over and over and over again was how much people downtown miss the C-Bus. So clearly it was a loved thing. Now, we've got to acknowledge that it was free, and that makes a difference, but it was a loved thing, and how do we think about circulators downtown? Also, we're getting bike improvements as part of 7071. We're getting new bike improvements. The city's been working on some, but we still need more network connectivity. So let's talk about those a little bit. So the blue is the old C-Bus line. So again, a lot of affection for that. We've heard discussion numerous times about could we have an east-west or downtown circulator that really looks at downtown, how do we connect Arena District and Columbus State, Saddle Peninsula, downtown, and even Children's Hospital. And is there some kind of thing that moves people around? So something to think about. Also talked about a low-stress network, particularly for bikes. And again, other cities I think are passing us, or have passed us. And we heard a lot of comments about this. So can we think about some kind of low-stress network that really caters to bikes, that does some kind of circulation system through downtown? We have a suggestion on where that alignment might work, something to think about. Also, how do we create an east-west connection? We've got great north-south along our river valleys systems that regionally run through, and it comes right through downtown on the side of greenways. How do we connect that system and the Ohio Erie Trail through to our neighborhoods that surround downtown and in downtown? How do we kind of connect east-west between, say, Alum Creek and the Scioto and Olentangy? So thinking about those kind of things, how do we build this low-stress bike network downtown? And then the last part of this is, and we're going to have an exercise over here, we've got finite right-of-way, and it's everything in the right-of-way, and the reality is we can't fit it all. So we're going to have to talk about what goes where and what streets we emphasize. This is just our attempt at saying, hey, maybe we could classify streets in a certain way, recognize which ones are kind of specialty streets, kind of the signature streets for downtown, what are kind of local ones we can build retail corridors like Gay Street on, what are kind of more regional connectors, neighborhood connectors, thinking about that, and thinking about how you could do these different facilities on different streets. So something to progress and think about. But let me just give you one example. Could you imagine High Street? We all recognize High Street as a signature street. We've got great sidewalks, we've got the CODA bus routes on it, but could we add some kind of bikes on this? Could we continue to reinforce it as this just great dynamic street? But in exchange, we make 3rd Street the premium transit corridor, north-south. So we have High Street as a signature street, 3rd Street's the signature transit corridor, where we still have traffic coming one way on one side, but we have 2-way transit on part of that street. So it's our transit spine. And then likewise, frees up Forestry to say, all right, we're still going to have cars on Forestry one way, but we're going to use part of that space as a two-way cycle track, bike boulevard, great protected green cycle network as a spine through downtown. Now, this is talking about north-south connections. We need to think about east-west, but just for instance, thinking about how we could do something like that. And then lastly, we want to talk about growing urban neighborhoods. This is really the core of this discussion about what we do downtown. I think we all know this. There's kind of the ingredients of what makes a great neighborhood. And we need to think about these and apply them to areas of downtown. So we've already talked about a number of these, but I'm going to go back to say, we heard over and over again, the surface lots. We probably need to have an intervention that builds parking structure that then frees up the surface lot for redevelopment. That's really what's going to activate it, and some policies. Mix of use is really important. We've talked about, I probably need to say it more than I did, diversity of housing, a broad spectrum of housing for everyone downtown, because we're going to grow the population. We've talked about active streets, a focal point, public space, green space, plaza, something that kind of where people can gather. Likewise, we talk about implanting third places, which are kind of the private places, but where people gather, the bars, coffee shops, where people come together, restaurants. And then the supportive services. That's something we need to spend time. We're really going to get those with more population, but that's things like the pharmacies and the groceries that people always mention. And probably the reality is things like daycares. We're realizing to get that office population, we got to be addressing things like daycare. And then again, the office environment. To maintain the offices downtown, we've got to create these great office environments, and they need to be plugged into all this. So we have an example. We've got several examples, but let's talk about the Gay Street example. This has some of these same stories. We had a bunch of service parking lots that were serving the offices along Broad Street. There's an intervention of a parking garages, and it allowed redevelopment of the neighborhood launch, which really changed the feel. We also had a significant public investment on Gay Street that changed it from just a standard road to one that has trees and stormwater and on-street parking, and gave it some love. And then we have cultural facilities sprinkled around that people can go to. We have retailers that have popped up to service that. Some of them have been very supported to make it them possible. We had existing historic business district on Gay Street with first floor retail that's come back, and it really provides that life. So it's really done a lot of these things that we're talking about. Now, a couple things. We're missing that green space, that public green space we probably want that's kind of a focal point. You could say, let's get this connected to the river. That's probably true. Doing it today, if we have a big goal for residents downtown, we probably want this at a higher density than what happened here. But again, as we were talking about earlier, this was just getting residential downtown at this point was a big win. So some things to think about, things we can do, but this shows that we know how to do it. You can imagine what this could be like. How do we get more of these in downtown? So that's one of your assignments tonight at one of the tables. We picked 5 neighborhood districts. There's more. If you have others you want to talk about, you can talk about them at the table, but we picked 5. River South, Capitol Square, Warehouse District, Topiary Park, Market Exchange. And we picked these because they kind of represent a spectrum of states of neighborhood development. So if you I'll start with Capitol Square. Capitol Square is offices around the Capitol. But what now we're talking about is seeing some of those office towers converting to residential. How do we integrate some more amenities, get the restaurants so that they're supported all week, 24 hours a day, rather than just during the 8 to 5 business day? How do we kind of revitalize, reinvent Capitol Square? And part of that is going to be a residential infill story. We've got River South, which we identified in 2002, and we needed to get more neighborhoods there, and we got development to happen there. And so we've had some investment. Parking lots, again, converted, garages, and probably, again, lower scale than maybe we do today, but residential infill, but we still have privately controlled parking lots. How do we continue that momentum in River South? How do we leverage the river that we have right there? If you look at Warehouse District, we got great old buildings, manufacturing buildings from a legacy historic for downtown Columbus. And they're starting to be reused, repurposed for office, a little bit of residential, retail. How do we grow a neighborhood and infill around that? If you look at Topiary Park, we have an historic neighborhood surrounded by fantastic cultural assets. How do we appropriately infill residential around that and grow some of the other amenities that we need to really make that a dynamic neighborhood? And then Market Exchange, right now, huge amount of surface parking lots. Huge amount of surface parking lots. A nice corridor with some retail, but it's struggling. What's the opportunity? How do we start from kind of that piece and really get residential in there and make that a dynamic place? So again, examples, and obviously there's others, ones that might be important to you that you want to talk about. So let's go again back to, that 10-year vision. If you have thoughts about this, love to hear them, but these are kind of those big buckets. This is where we want to get Columbus downtown over the next 10 years. And again, we're going to be hanging, based on all the input we get from you and the community over the next several months, a draft plan around this. So let's talk about that next step. So we have activities for you to do tonight. Really want to get your input. We have follow-up. A lot of this material will be online, including this presentation, if you want to review it or share it. And we have a survey, which is out back table. Andrew's going to show you where. I'd love to have you fill the survey out as you go around the tables. Survey is a word, but I mean, basically it's asking you for some input on different questions we're talking about tonight. I'd love to get that from you. And then again, we're going to pull this together and we're going to have a third workshop where we're going to be sharing, here's everything we heard, here's how it all fits together, here's ideas of how we can actually implement it in downtown Columbus. So we're excited, so please make sure you pay attention and come back to that third workshop. And we have, if you haven't been there, it's worth going and checking out, Downtown Columbus/plan website. It's going to have these materials on it. Please continue to stay engaged, share with your friends, neighbors, coworkers, get them to participate, because this is, again, everyone's plan. The more participation, the better this is going to be. All right, so about done. Thanks for listening to me talk this much. So we have 4 tables plus the big ideas worksheet. One is on the increasing leveraging our assets. So it talks about the office and the retail and the eds and meds and culture, one of your ideas there. We have a Boost the Green network where we want you to talk about how do we activate the riverfront? Where do we maybe put some neighborhood parks? How do we build that green network? We have the Accelerate the Mobility Momentum tables right here. Got some actual street cross sections and got a little exercise for people who want to try to build their own ideal street on actual Columbus streets so you can see what fits and what kind of trade-offs you have to make. And then we have the Grow the Urban Neighborhoods in the back. Really would like a lot of input, like what things are we missing? What areas do we focus on to create these great neighborhoods in districts in downtown? So I've talked enough. Go ahead.
Sitting in your chair, please fill that out, and you can pin it up on the wall over here. And then if you haven't grabbed a survey, please grab a survey and fill it out. There's a basket you can deposit that in on your way out. But it sort of guides around the room and to the station.
So thank you so much for being here tonight. Really, please spend some time. I mean, do what you want to do, but would love to get your input on this. And again, thank you for being interested in downtown and its future.